Good afternoon, boys and girls, friends, lovers, children of all ages. We're going to jump in on this video for a few minutes and join a Zoom conference on the movie The Story of Plastic.
These, I got a little obsessed with mine. In fact, I got a little obsessed with all my stuff. Have you ever wondered where all the stuff we buy comes from and where it goes when we throw it out? I couldn't stop wondering about that, so I looked it up. And what the textbook said is that stuff moves through a system from extraction to production to distribution to consumption to disposal. All together, it's called the materials economy. Well, I looked into it a little bit more. In fact, I spent 10 years traveling the world, tracking where our stuff comes from and where it goes. And you know what I found out? That is not the whole story. There is a lot missing from this explanation. For one thing, this system looks like it's fine. No problem. But the truth is, it's a system in crisis. And the reason it's a system in crisis is it's a linear system and we live on a finite planet. And you cannot run a linear system on a finite planet indefinitely. Every step along the way, this system is interacting with the real world. In real life, it's not happening on a blank white page. It's interacting with societies, cultures, economies, the environment. And all along the way, it's bumping up against limits. Limits we don't see here because the diagram is incomplete. So let's go back through. Let's fill in some of the blanks and see what's missing. Well, one of the most important things that's missing is people. Yes, people. People live and work all along this system. And some people in this system matter a little more than others. Some have a little more say. Who are they? Well, let's start with the government. Now, my friends tell me I should use a tank to symbolize the government, and that's true in many countries and increasingly in our own. After all, more than 50% of our federal tax money is now going to the military. But I'm using a person to symbolize the government because I hold true to the vision and values the government should be of the people, by the people, for the people. It's the government's job to watch out for us, to take care of us. That's their job. Then along came the corporation. Now, the reason the corporation looks bigger than the government is that the corporation is bigger than the government. Of the 100 largest economies on Earth now, 51 are corporations. And as the corporation has grown in size and power, we've seen a little change in the government where they're a little more concerned in making sure everything's working out for those guys than for us. Okay, so let's see what else is missing from this picture. We'll start with extraction, which is a fancy word for natural resource exploitation, which is a fancy word for trashing the planet. What this looks like is we chop down the trees, we blow up mountains to get the metals inside, we use up all the water, and we wipe out the animals. So here we are running up against our first limit. We are running out of resources. We are using too much stuff. Now, I know this can be hard to hear, but it's the truth, so we've got to deal with it. In the past 3 decades alone, 1/3 of the planet's natural resource space has been consumed. Gone. We are cutting and mining and hauling and trashing the place so fast that we're undermining the planet's very ability for people to live here. Where I live, in the United States, we have less than 4% of our original forests left. 40% of the waterways have become undrinkable. And our problem is not just that we're using too much stuff, but we're using more than our share. We have 5% of the world's population, but we're using 30% of the world's resources and creating 30% of the world's waste. If everybody consumed at US rates, we would need 3 to 5 planets. And you know what? We've only got 1. So my country's response to this limitation is simply to go take somebody else's. This is the third world, which some would say is another word for our stuff that somehow got on somebody else's land. So what does that look like? The same thing, trashing the place. 75% of global fisheries now are fished at or beyond capacity. 80% of the planet's original forests are gone. In the Amazon alone, we're losing 2,000 trees a minute. That is 7 football fields a minute. And what about the people who live here? Well, according to these guys, they don't own these resources, even if they've been living there for generations. They don't own the means of production, and they're not buying a lot of stuff. And in this system, if you don't own or buy a lot of stuff, you don't have value. So next, the materials move to production. And what happens there is we use energy to mix toxic chemicals in with the natural resources to make toxic contaminated products. There are over 100,000 synthetic chemicals in use in commerce today. Only a handful of them have even been tested for health impacts, and none have been tested for synergistic health impacts. That means when they interact with all the other chemicals we're exposed to every day, so we don't know the full impact on health and the environment of all these toxic chemicals. But we do know one thing: toxics in, toxics out. As long as we keep putting toxics into our industrial production systems, we're going to keep getting toxics in the stuff that we bring into our homes and workplaces and schools, and our bodies. Like BFRs, brominated flame retardants, they're a chemical that make things more fireproof, but they are super toxic. They're a neurotoxin. That means toxic to the brain. What are we even doing using a chemical like this? Yet we put it in our computers, our appliances, couches, mattresses, even some pillows. In fact, we take our pillows, we douse them in a neurotoxin, then we bring them home and put our heads on them for 8 hours a night to sleep. Now, I don't know, but it seems to me in this country with so much potential, we could think of a better way to stop our heads from catching on fire at night. Now, these toxics build up the food chain and concentrate in our bodies. Do you know what is the food at the top of the food chain with the highest level of many toxic contaminants? Human breast milk. That means that we've reached a point where the smallest members of our societies, our babies, are getting the highest lifetime dose of toxic chemicals from breastfeeding from their mothers. Is that not an incredible violation? Breastfeeding must be the most fundamental human act of nurturing. It should be sacred and safe. Now, breastfeeding is still best, and mothers should definitely keep breastfeeding, but we should protect it. They should protect it. I thought they were looking out for us. And of course, the people who bear the biggest brunt of these toxic chemicals are the factory workers, many of whom are women of reproductive age. They're working with reproductive toxins, carcinogens, and more. Now I ask you, what kind of woman of reproductive age would work in a job exposed to reproductive toxins except for a woman with no other option? And that's one of the beauties of this system. The erosion of local environments and economies here ensures a constant supply of people with no other option. Globally, 200,000 people a day are moving from environments that have sustained them for generations into cities, many to live in slums, looking for work, no matter how toxic that work may be. So you see, it's not just resources that are wasted along this system, but people too. Whole communities get wasted. Yep, toxics in, toxics out. A lot of the toxics leave the factories in products, but even more leave as byproducts or pollution. And it's a lot of pollution. In the US, our industry admits to releasing over 4 billion pounds of toxic chemicals a year. And it's probably a lot more because that's only what they admit. So that's another limit, because yuck, who wants to look at and smell 4 billion pounds of toxic chemicals a year? So what do? Move the dirty factories overseas, pollute someone else's land. But surprise, a lot of that pollution is coming right back at us, carried by wind currents. So what happens after all these natural resources are turned into products? Well, it moves here for distribution. Now, distribution means selling all the toxic contaminated junk as quickly as possible. The goal here is to keep the prices down, keep the people buying, and keep the inventory moving. How do they keep the prices down? Well, they don't pay the store workers very much, and they skimp on health insurance every time they can. It's all about externalizing the costs. What that means is that the real costs of making stuff aren't captured in the price. In other words, we aren't paying for the stuff we buy. I was thinking about this the other day. I was walking to work and I wanted to listen to the news, so I popped into a Radio Shack to buy a radio. I found this cute little green radio for $4.99. I was standing there in line to buy this thing. I was thinking, how could $4.99 possibly capture the cost of making this radio and getting it into my hands? The metal was probably mined in South Africa. The petroleum was probably drilled in Iraq. The plastics were probably produced in China. Maybe the whole thing was assembled by some 15-year-old in a maquiladora in Mexico. $4. universal. Huh? You have a few FPUCC people here. Taylor Henderson is there. It's Rosenberg.
Hi, Dan.
Hello.
Dan,
Yeah?
could I ask a question? I came to this through an email on Eventbrite. Are we Colorado people, or maybe you're going to say what we are? It seems very expansive.
Yes. I will talk a little bit about where we're all from.
Great.
So,
Thank you.
yes. And it is now 7 o'clock, so I think that we should go ahead and get started. My name is Ann Carlberg, and I am the team leader for the Green Justice team of the Kirkabani Bray United Church of Christ. I want to, on behalf of the event planners and the sponsors, welcome all of you to this event, The Plastics Problem, A Call to Action. So, Jasmine, will you put up the first slide, please? Okay, in it myself, the planning team for this event includes Jasmine Barco of EcoCycle, and she is our presenter this evening in a few minutes. We also have the Green First Task Force of the First Universalist Church of Denver, who has that team has been instrumental in helping us plan this event. Task Force members include Tony Nadine, Hillary Moreland, and Carol Whitney. And then also with the Kirkabani Bray, Robert Bowles and Paul Kreischer helped with the planning. An enthusiastic thank you and acknowledgement to the Climate Justice Committee of Together Colorado for sponsoring this event. Together Colorado is a nonpartisan, multiracial, multi-faith community organization comprised of over 200 congregations, schools, and faith leaders across the state. Now, to get to know each other a little bit on the poll that will be on your screen in a few minutes, a few seconds, hopefully. There we go. We'd just like you to respond if you're affiliated with one of these faith communities or organizations. So take a few minutes to submit your responses to the poll, and then we'll have results coming up on the screen.
the UU members are topping us all here with 40% of our respondents. But it looks like we have a good group of people from other organizations here as well. So we want to welcome you. And I know that there's a few people, welcome to them. Okay, good. Okay, Jasmine, could you go with the next slide? Thank you. So as most of you participating in this evening's event live in the state of Colorado, I want to acknowledge that this territory is the traditional land of many indigenous tribes, including Ute, Cheyenne, Arapaho, Apache, Shoshone, Comanche, Kiowa, and Navajo. As a result of various treaties and military efforts during the 1800s, all but the Ute tribe. 100 years, however, government efforts to promote assimilation led to a second relocation of Native peoples, this time from reservations to urban centers. Denver became one such relocation site and is now home to many indigenous peoples from different tribes. As we acknowledge this painful part of American history, we must recognize not only the crimes committed against indigenous brothers and sisters, but also the crimes committed against the land that once nourished and sustained as a living being. They have always emphasized living lightly on the land as a means of minimizing environmental impact and ensuring a continued quality of life for future generations. May we hold to this wisdom tonight as we commit to learning about the plastic problem and working toward restoration of creation. Okay, next slide. We are pleased that nearly 150 people responded to our invitation, and many are participating in tonight's event. Our goal is to make it inspirational and compelling for each of you. We want you to leave with an increased understanding of the plastics problem and a personal commitment to work towards solutions. For that to happen with a group this size, we will be using breakout rooms. For the presentation, after the presentation, you will be put into a breakout room with 5 to 7 other eco leaders. This will provide an opportunity for you to begin developing your own personal action plan and to receive helpful feedback from others. In addition, we will have a Q&A at the end of the presentation. To make the best use of our limited time, we would like you to put your questions in the chat down at the bottom. And then facilitators will compile the questions so as many as possible can be addressed. Okay, now I'd like to introduce Jasmine Barco from EcoCycle. Jasmine is an environmental designer with a love for graphic design, outreach, and engagement. She started her journey at the age of 5 when she immigrated from Peru to America. Her life's lessons on adaptability and open-mindedness have led her to travel to over 20 countries. She believes that integrating experiences and design from abroad is crucial to sustainable design and environmental and social justice. Jasmine does community outreach for Groundwork Denver as well as for EcoCycle. So Jasmine, welcome and thank you for your participation this evening and for your presentation.
Thank you, Anne, and thank you everyone for coming here tonight. I'm super excited to go through this presentation. We've added polls, and so I hope it's engaging and you come away feeling inspired. So we're here to talk about the plastics problem, and we have a call to action. So first, let me talk about EcoCycle. Here we go. Really quick. So EcoCycle started in 1976 with a group of volunteers who saw the need for recycling in their community. They came together, gathered money, and bought school buses. They retrofitted those school buses by taking out the school bus seats and drove around the community picking up everyone's recyclables. Now, nearly 40 years later, we actually have trucks that pick up recycling and composting. We started one of the first Center for Hard to Recycle Materials in the nation. We have a robust schools education program for Boulder County. We do a ton of zero waste events. And the department I'm with is the campaigns department, and we do a ton of lobbying and education around how cities can be better at diverting or recycling and composting their waste instead of sending it all to the landfill. So we all watched, hopefully, the story of plastics before this presentation. And I just want to
everywhere, not the plastic industry's fault. And so as you can see to the left to the left of your screen here, in 1955, there's a pretty famous picture showing the throwaway lifestyle and how easy it is to use single-use items instead of washing and reusing your cutlery, for example, or plates. In 75, packaging companies urged municipalities to run taxpayer-funded recycling programs as a way to get rid of this problem. And in 1990, plastics actually quadrupled because the recycling facilities that were run by municipalities, or are still run by municipalities in a lot of cases, were taking in more and more plastics, and so people were starting to think, oh, well, plastics is recyclable, and then there's a way to safely get rid of it, so let's just put it in the recycle bin. So that's why in the 1990s, plastics quadrupled. The industry kept fighting on restrictions on disposables, and they continued to promote municipally funded recycling programs. In 2005, you can see there's a huge upwards line that goes towards more and more millions of metric tons of plastic produced. One of the big things that was a catalyst to that is in 2005, the U.S. Energy Policy Act. So those are exemptions on health and environmental regulations. And because of those exemptions, shale gas had a boom, and that actually increased plastic production. And in 2015, the 40-year-old ban on shale exports was lifted, which equals more production of plastics. Not to mention the world's largest plastic manufacturing facility opened with billions of dollars in tax breaks and subsidies, as if they need it, right? So here's where we are now with the scary plastic projections. If nothing changes, plastic production is expected to quadruple in 30 years. A lot of that is said to be because we are shifting to more and more renewable energy. And plastic comes from oil and gas. And if they are losing their money from oil and gas to renewables, well, what else do they have? They have plastic production. So it's in their interest to produce more and more plastics. The scary thing is that in the movie, we saw a fisherman say that there's currently 60% fish in the ocean and 40% plastic, which is too much already. The plastics industry has been saying a couple of myths. One is that it's an infrastructure problem. The government is not properly funding recycling, but the truth is this plastic waste is not meant to be managed. And it's impossible to manage it. Even first world countries like the US are struggling with all of the plastics that we get in the recycling centers. The second myth is that the consumer is at fault, that people can start littering and people can stop it. But again, the finger should not be pointed to the consumer nor the government. It should be pointed to the producer themselves, who are producing all of this stuff and introducing it to our environment in the first place. So here is one of the problems with plastic, and it's an image used from the movie as well of how plastics are extracted. So a lot of it comes from like fracking and oil and gas. The thing about this is that it's actually cheaper to produce plastic from the virgin source than it is to separate it, clean it, make it into pellets, melt it, and make it into something else again. And it's cheaper because the oil and gas industry has so many subsidies that is just economically cheaper to create plastic from the virgin source than it is to recycle plastic itself. It then goes to a refinery, and there are a ton of air emissions going on in this process. There's more than 86,000 chemicals recognized in the US, but only 187 are regulated by the EPA for air pollution. And a lot of times we don't know what's in these exhausts at the refinery process. It goes to be made into a product, which then goes to your grocery store, which then goes to your home. And then there are 3 different ways that you can get rid of it. There are some places that incinerate it. Thankfully, Colorado is not one of those places. It could either end up as litter and make its way to the water system and to the rivers and eventually the ocean. And here in Colorado, we landfill all of our waste, so we bury everything. The scary thing about littering is that plastics doesn't go away. It just turns into smaller and smaller pieces. And we have been finding more and more micro and nanoplastics everywhere, in the soil, in the air, in the rain, in the water, in our bodies, everywhere. And we'll definitely talk more about microplastics here soon. But the thing is that a healthy environment is a basic human right. And there are other countries that are suffering way more from this plastics pollution problem than we are. Here, one of the movie highlights this recycler, and he's talking about different markets and how the plastic bales have different plastic with film, different colors, some are printed on. There are 7+ different types of resins or chemicals that make up the plastic itself. And there's even a difference between the clear plastics. And he was saying the test is to either hear it or smell the smoke. And he even made a joke saying, well, that's got to be healthy, right? But unfortunately, people in third world countries are doing this to recycle plastics, and that is not okay. So quick poll. If it has a recycling symbol, it can be recycled. True or false? The poll should come up soon. All right, 86% people have voted. Should we share the results? You are right. If it has a recycling symbol, it can be recycled is actually a false statement. So let's learn a little bit about this. So the symbol on the left is a recycle symbol, which was created in 1970 by Gary Anderson, versus a resin identification code, which is a recycle symbol with the number in the middle, created in 1988 by the plastics industry. So that's pretty tricky. It's just used as a way to say what kind of chemicals this plastic is, and doesn't actually represent or mean that it's recyclable or not. Here's another poll. What plastic items can be recycled? You have an option of wrappers, bottles, jugs, jars, cutlery, and tubs. Should be multiple choice, so you can pick as many as you want. Again, what plastics can be recycled? Wrappers, bottles, jugs, jars, plastic cutlery, or tubs? Okay. 80% of people have voted. Get your votes in if you haven't already. And we are at 87%. All right. So here are the results. I think I have to get rid of the poll to actually show you what the answer is on my slide. So the plastic items that can be recycled are bottles, tubs, jugs, and jars. Wrappers and cutlery, unfortunately, are not recyclable, especially in your single stream recycling. So you must realize that everything that you put in your recycle bin is going to go to a recycle truck, which then takes it to the recycling center. And when the truck gets to the center, it dumps all of its material out. Then someone with a bobcat has to come over, pick up materials from that mountain of recyclables, and feeds it to a machine. The machine has different technology like magnets to pick up steel and tin cans, or lasers to see what type of plastic something is. Unfortunately, wrappers and things like plastic bags are so lightweight, they'll get sucked up in a gust and sucked up in between the machine's gears, therefore jamming the machine. So we don't want that there. And I'll touch on how you can recycle plastic film soon, but do not put that in your single stream recycling. And then cutlery, almost the same thing. It's so long and skinny, which is why straws can't be recycled either, that it will literally fall in between the machine's cracks. Just imagine a mountain of recyclables. Someone has to come in with a bobcat to pick up all the recyclables and feed it to the machine. It's just too small. The recyclers in Denver have a palm rule, and that is if it's bigger than your palm, it can make it through the sorting process and it can actually go with its like item. A cutlery piece is technically bigger than your palm. It's longer than your palm, but it doesn't have the width. So keep that in mind. The plastics that we prefer are 1s, 2s, and 5s, and those are the bottles, tubs, jugs, and jars. Yeah, so everyone, please say it with me. Bottles, tubs, jugs, and jars.
Bottles,
Tubs, jugs, and jars. That is what can be recycled. don't think about the numbers so much. I am giving you background information on numbers just for your knowledge, but the easiest message we found is bottles, tubs, jugs, and jars. So yes, all of which you can see here to the images on the right. So this is what these plastics can be made into. Number one, plastic bottles can be made back into bottles. They can be made into carpet and textiles. If you see textiles like polyester or other synthetic fibers, it's made from plastics, which is really crazy to think about. But there is a whole nother, it's kind of like a double-edged sword there, because when you wash your clothing, microfibers leave your clothing, and then that gets into the water supply. And again, plastic doesn't go away. It just turns into smaller and smaller pieces. These pieces are already small fibers of plastic. There's no way that the wastewater treatment facility can filter them out. So all of those microfibers are going into our streams and into our oceans. And honestly, I would not be surprised if there's more plastic in the ocean than that 40% estimate, because that 40% estimate are larger plastic pieces, and it doesn't account for microfibers or microplastics. Number two, HDPE bottles, like milk jugs, can be made into drainage pipes. Number five, containers like yogurt tubs can be made into plastic paint cans and automotive parts. Since I spoke so much about microfibers, here's a little bit more information on that. There were some researchers over at the Colorado School of Mines that found evidence of microplastics in rain samples here in Colorado. They even went as far as identifying the top colors. I believe the number one color was blue, then red, and then yellow. You'd have to look at the study to triple check that, but we also have a webinar that was called "It's Raining Plastics, Now What?" with Dr. James Ranville from Colorado School of Mines. So it's a good one to watch if you're interested in learning more about microplastics. But here's the scary thing. This is a picture from National Geographic. It's a picture of a water flea. And they're able to take a picture of the microplastics inside of its body. So the green glow particle pieces in its body are microfibers, or microplastics rather. So that is how small microplastic pieces can be. And there have been other studies coming from Australia that has shown human feces to have microplastics in it, and it's everywhere. If it's in the rain, it's in our bodies, and it's in our bodies. So here are the others. So number four, number two, LDPE and HDPE are just film plastics. They could be recycled in separate collections. So grocery stores will often have a collection. There are a couple of markets that are buying back this film, melting it, and making it into decking material. So Trex is a very famous example of a company that takes in these film plastics and converts it into those like fake wood decking materials. In the industry, we commonly refer to number 3, 6, and 7 as junk plastics because no one wants to buy them. There's just no markets available for these plastics, and they are a little bit more harmful to humans when it comes to the chemicals that have been used to create these plastics. We'll go over this a little bit more in the next slide. And commercially compostable plastics, so number 7, PLA. Now you have to look for PLA because there's also number 7 that's not PLA. Number 7 really is and everything else category. So there's more than just a specific chemical compound for number 7 plastics. It's basically the other category of plastics, whatever that is, except for PLA, which we'll go into soon. I just wanted to quickly share this. It's EcoCycle's Pocket Guide to Plastics. And really, we reiterate that avoiding plastics beats recycling plastics. and all plastics can leach chemicals under certain conditions. So here we see numbers 3, 6s, and 7s, which are considered the junk plastics in the recycling industry. And well, yeah, I don't know. I don't quite know what to say about these guys. It's very carcinogenic to human health, and it can leach whatever that word is, phthalates, with use. It has been associated with causing things like infertility and development issues in newborn babies as well if people are heavily exposed to it. Number 6 is usually those to-go containers. Funny enough, number 6 also PS, or maybe just number 6. No, I've seen PS under this too, the red Solo cups. That's number 6. A lot of people think, oh, it's plastic, it can be recycled, but no, that resin of plastic we don't want. Plus with the red Solo cup example, it often can get squished in between other materials, and then it shatters into a bunch of tiny pieces, and then it's like hard to pick up, and it's just a mess. Plus, there's like no one that wants to buy this material. So it can leach styrene, and which is a possible human carcinogen as well. And then number 7, PC or polycarbonate, can leach bisphenol A, known as a hormone disruptor. And yeah, don't confuse it with number 7 PLA, because number 7 PLA is polylactic acid, which is safe and biodegradable. Again, you got to really read the labels here. And as I mentioned, 1s, 2s, and 5s have strong markets, so we can recycle them. Again, those are the bottles, tubs, jugs, and jars, and LDPE, which are the film plastics. So number 7, PLA. So PLA stands for polylactic acid. I tell people like an easy way to remember whether it is compostable or not is think of the word plant and just take out the NT and you're left with PLA. So maybe that could be an easy trick for you to remember whether something is compostable or not. But it's made from plant-based sources, but it must go to an industrial compost facility. It takes a long time for it to break down in your backyard compost. So definitely don't recommend that. But around 90% of it is converted back into CO2, leaving water and biomass as byproducts, which then is that compost. And that whole process breaks down within 3 to 6 months. I also want to be wary of the term biodegradable, which is used for greenwashing in a lot of cases. So if something says green or eco-friendly or natural, biodegradable means it can either be plant-based or oil-based. It contains additional microorganisms that break down the material into smaller and smaller pieces, again, creating microplastics. So please look for the BPI certified compostable symbol. That the Biodegradable Products Institute has tested a bunch of the compostable plastics and it's approved. So BPI certified compostable symbol. Please look for it when you're buying things like compostable bags for your compost. So just to recap on why plastics recycling is such a challenge. 1, no one wants to buy it. There's a serious lack of end markets, which are the people that buy a raw material, melt it, and make it into something. 2, it's just tough economics because the price of oil is so cheap that it's cheaper to create plastic from the virgin source than it is to separate it and do that whole process of cleaning it, making it into pellets, sending it to be melted, to be made into something else again. There's also a bunch of other things like there's too many different types of plastics and it's growing and people are way too confused about it. So there's high levels of contamination and it's expensive to store, or there's no collection programs for the thousands of different kinds of plastics there are. So the thing is that we will not recycle our way out of this problem. But there are global policies and corporate commitments to eliminate things like single-use items like plastic cutlery or all polystyrene packaging, which again is at number 6, very hazardous to human health. And we're getting our food in it. So please never put your to-go styrofoam container in a microwave and microwave your food in there. Please just take it out, or yeah. Don't poison yourself with these plastic chemicals, please. Things like plastic stirrers, straws, biodegradable plastics, PVC packaging, disposable plates and bowls. Yeah, we're not going to recycle our way out of this problem. We need policies and corporate commitments to eliminate these things. We all know about COVID, right? Here's the kind of fascinating part about COVID in the plastics industry. The plastics industry took advantage of the pandemic and started advocating for rollback on plastic pollution policies like bag bans and bag fees, when there is no evidence showing that suspending these policies that reduce disposable plastics or require disposable menus and packaging in food services and grocery stores will increase worker safety or protect the public against the pandemic. The CDC even says that the virus spreads person to person through respiratory droplets. The transmission of the virus from surface to person is not documented. And there actually are studies that show that the virus lives longer on plastics than they do on other materials. So we don't have to choose between COVID-19, safety, and the environment. Reusables can be used safely, and in a lot of cases are safer because you own that reusable bag. You're the only one touching it. And when you come home from the grocery store, you can wash it. That guarantee is not there for disposable plastic bags. There are more myths coming out of the industry offering false solutions. So chemical recycling technologies will recycle all plastics is one of them. But the thing is, plastics to fuel is not considered recycling. And technologies are not proven to be cleaner than traditional recycling and face challenges, bad economics, and insufficient collection programs and more. Another myth is we need more education to help consumers recycle more plastics correctly. The thing is, we need systemic change to reduce plastic consumption first. Then major investments in policy and infrastructure to improve plastics recycling and better labeling and product design to reduce confusion among the public. And the third myth is recyclers make it impossible to recycle plastics. And the thing is, recycling alone is not going to save our plastics problem. We have a packaging crisis, not a recycling crisis. Bottles, like glass bottles and aluminum cans, are still being melted and made back into new bottles and cans. Paper is still being recycled, from like cardboard boxes to white office paper to newspapers to eventually paper towels, tissues, and napkins. That's fine. We don't have a recycling crisis. We have a packaging crisis and a plastics crisis. So the best thing to do, as the movie mentioned, is shut the faucet. We just got to stop the water from coming in for us to be able to deal with the problem that we already have. So another quick poll. The movie mentions that there are bans on bans to block local progress to reduce plastic pollution. So my poll question to you all is, does Colorado have a ban on banning plastics? Yes or no, or not sure? Right, 80% have voted. We'll wait a couple more seconds. Ooh, voting's at an all-time high, 90% voted. All right, we ready for the results? Well, yeah, I'm not sure. The answer is actually yes. We do have a ban on banning plastics in Colorado. And if I can get my next slide, here's an article on the history of Colorado's ban on banning plastics. It was introduced in 1993 and has been a law ever since 1993. And it is a very little known Colorado law. essentially written to protect recycling. But we didn't know the problems that plastics would cause back then with like microplastics and whatnot. So right now, it's actually illegal for cities to ban things like straws, grocery store bags, and styrofoam containers, which is why a lot of cities have fees on bags, and I don't know about straws, but definitely bags, as a way to get around that law. Until we lift that law and say this should no longer be a law, then yeah, I mean we have this law. The movie also highlighted this, and I wanted to highlight this too. This is one of the big problems with plastic, and it's happening at the legislative level. So here you see two men, both of whom are or were the U.S. Secretary of State, but look at their titles: former ExxonMobil CEO and former oil equipment manufacturer. These people are in positions of power and have the ability to decide laws introduced in the US, and their backgrounds are in oil and gas. So what do you think is going to happen there? So let's talk about some systemic solutions. One of the things is know your legislators, representatives, and people in power. So here's the amazing thing about that. You pay their salary, and a good boss checks in with their employees to see what they're doing about the issues that they care about. So if you go to this website, Colorado Find My Legislator tool, you can put in your zip code and it will let you know who your representatives are. I'm assuming most of you are from Denver, so I took the liberty to put together this map showing who the different Colorado General Assembly senators are. So these are the people that make the laws for Colorado, not to be confused with the people who represent Colorado at the federal level. That's the Congress. This is the General Assembly. So in Denver, the Senate is divided into 5 different areas, or Denver is divided into 5 different areas for state senators, whom you can see here. So there's 35 state senators total in the state of Colorado. And at the House of Representatives, there are 65 total representatives in Colorado. And so you can see the same areas further divided into 8 different sections. Not to mention city council. There are 13 city council members and a mayor. And again, the boundaries are redrawn for who represents what area. Not to mention other important power structures like Denver Public Schools, for example. They have 5 different representatives who represent parts of the city that make a lot of decisions around Denver Public Schools. Or maybe RTD. RTD has a board as well, and different maps drawn of like who is in charge of what area. So there are so many different positions of power, and it's just so important to be kept in the know of who's representing you. This person's job is to represent you. So how well are they doing that? Here are some solutions you can do at the individual level. Reduce, refuse, reuse, and repair instead. When it comes to the microfiber problem, something that you can do is look for natural fibers when you're buying clothing. So things like cotton are great and not synthetic fibers. So fast fashion is equal to synthetic fibers, which is equal to plastics. So that's why fast fashion items only last 2 years, 3 years, and then there's a huge hole, or it's just torn, or it's just deteriorated. So it's not the best quality. And mend your clothes, that's always an important thing. You can also buy secondhand clothes. You can adopt a zero waste lifestyle and swap things like the classic plastic water bottle to a reusable container. EcoCycle even has a How to Quit Plastics workbook that you can use. And this presentation will be made available to all of you, so you can click on the links afterwards too. Some further individual actions: you can host a cleanup and log your litter into different apps like Trash Blitz or Litterati. You can take pictures of littered areas and send it to your representatives to show them that this is a problem and they should be doing something about it. You can use apps like Plastic Score, which is a Yelp-like app that rates restaurants on their single-use items and how many single-use items they have. And you can become an eco-leader and stay up to date on waste issues, which we'll talk about soon too. The movie talks about circular economies, and it presents this this graphic and case study on the Philippines. This is how much they were spending to landfill their waste, and when they decided to move to a zero waste model instead, they saved a lot of money. And the reason is because in a zero waste circular economy, you're creating jobs, which means that you're creating money and a new livelihood for different people. And it's not just about collecting, recycling, and composting. It's also about the reuse and repair industry. So many things nowadays are designed to be used one time and never again. For example, it's all the way over there. I have a lighter, and then I was thinking, when the fuel runs out, how am I gonna refill it? How can I refill it? There's no way to refill it. I try to really pry it open, but I can't. These things are not made with repair in mind, and that is not okay. Composting, well then, it's the Earth's natural way. The new soil will help grow new food or different items, and then they can go back to your local grocery store. And a circular economy is really something, it's an economy where a waste product turns into the input and turns into the raw material for a new product, which is pretty cool.
Jasmine, we're at 5 minutes.
All right, sounds good. Thank you. I will speed it up. So last year we passed an end markets bill over at the Colorado legislature. You could see this over here, who the prime sponsors were, and you can check out more about it. But it was signed into law last year, and the bill includes 4 components. That is to create a recycling and market development center. There's actually meetings going on now, and you can listen in, you can sign up for these meetings, and you can listen into what the advisors and stakeholders are saying for how this end market development center should look like. And you as a resident can also give in your input and ask, well, hey, what about fabrics? What are we doing for fabrics as an end market here in Colorado? For example, the bill also includes a producer responsibility literature review. So extended producer responsibility is where the manufacturers are responsible for the end of life of their products. So they produce it and they have to show us how they're going to take it back. What's awesome is that the discussion nowadays is shifting from why EPR or extended producer responsibility to how. And the cool thing is that Colorado already has EPR legislation on paint. When you buy paint, you have to pay a fee that goes into this program, and then folks collect it. They have different drop-off centers throughout the state, and they recycle the paint with local recyclers, which is really cool. There's also a producer responsibility next meeting on February 24th. You can sign up here too to hear the state's findings on what they've learned about EPR as well, and how feasible it is or not in Colorado. The other parts are business property, personal property tax reimbursements, and statewide education campaign on recycling. So EPR has a ton of benefits, including increasing our recycling rate, expanding equitable access to recycling, and a whole bunch of other good things that can really help us reach the next level in our zero waste game. This year, a plastic pollution prevention bill will be introduced in February later this month. It does 3 things: ban styrofoam, It bans plastic bags and puts a fee on paper bags. And just mind you, this is plastic bags at the grocery store that you would get at checkout. It's not like a box with a trash bags, for example. It's just the grocery store bags. And it lifts the plastics preemption, which is that ban on banning plastics in Colorado. So these are the folks that are, or the representatives and senators that are introducing this bill this year. Another cool effort are ballot initiatives. So do you remember 2A from November 2020? It produces around 40 million a year and 50% goes to underserved communities. And this was started by Denver residents like you with the goal to fund climate action in Denver. It originally started as as an energy tax, fell short 1,000 signatures to put it on the ballot. But the city saw how much interest there was from the public in this. And so they said, hey, how about this? We'll create a climate action task force that will address the need on how to fund climate. And the task force put forth the climate action tax. They actually could not come to consensus on an energy tax and said, let's do a sales tax instead, 0.25% increase in sales taxes. And it was put on the ballot, and the people of Denver said, yes, we want this. We need climate action. So they voted yes. Now the applications to be on the Sustainability Advisory Committee is set to start in April, and this committee will help oversee how the climate funds administered by the Office of Climate Action, Sustainability, and Resiliency should be spent in the community. But what's extra special about this is up to 120 residents from Denver can participate in this process and decide how their taxpayer money is spent. Sign up to be an eco-leader. I always say an eco-leader is a person who's not afraid to put their hand in aluminum, their hand in the trash to save an aluminum can. It's a person that everyone's always asking, like, hey, is this recyclable or not? The best thing is that an eco-leader is up to speed on all things zero waste because they have a direct contact line with EcoCycle. And last but not least, our Zero Waste Denver campaign. Essentially, we're asking 3 things: reward recycling, composting, discourage waste, increase business and multi-family complex recycling, and provide curbside composting for all residents. So something you can do is sign the letter, which is asking for these things, and it'll automatically go to your city council representatives to let them know that you care. Here's the sad thing: Denver has 2020 sustainability goals, and that was last year. And our goal was to be average. The recycling rate, the national average throughout the U.S. is 34%, but our recycling rate is now 24%. So it went up a couple of percentage points since I made this graphic, but we're still below average. So finally, Q&A. Hopefully that wasn't too long.
Okay, thank you, Jasmine.
So much. Want me to stop sharing my screen?
Pardon me?
Do you want me to stop sharing my screen?
You could, yes. And then some people, there's been a nice conversation going on in the chat with people sharing different ideas, and as well as asking questions. So people might be able to continue to read some of what's being said there, but let me bring up a couple of questions that came up in the chat. One person was wondering if the process of recycling plastics creates greenhouse gases.
Yes, it does. It mainly emissions, and I'm not 1,000% sure about what chemical concoctions are being released in the air, but that's definitely room for opportunity to improve the recycling technology that we have, to improve filters, or maybe even improve the entire process. Because when plastics get recycled, plastics is not like metal or glass that can be melted and made into something new infinitely. It can only be recycled 1 or 2 other times, because each time it goes through the recycling process, more and more of it burns off and then goes off into the air. And so like one water bottle made into another water bottle, that second water bottle will have like 60% of the first water bottle. And then the third water bottle will have around 10% of that original water bottle. So that's how it kind of degrades and evaporates. if that's the right term, over time. So there's definitely room for improvement there.
So you kind of touched on one of the other questions, and that is, can recyclable plastics be recycled only once or more than once?
1 to 2 times.
Right. And it also depends on the type of plastic. Isn't that correct?
No, in general, plastics are 1 to 2 times.
And that's it. Okay. Okay. Do different recyclers vary in the type of plastics they accept?
Yes. Definitely. It all depends on markets, right? So 1s, 2s, and 5s are the strong markets out there, but it all depends on location too. So are you in a rural area versus the front range that has more infrastructure? And so a lot of it becomes a collection problem as well. And since there are so many different types of plastics and it's so confusing to know what's what, it's a huge problem when it comes to contamination. So like food particles left on like plastic pieces, like a peanut butter jar, for example. If you try to sell a peanut butter jar full of peanut butter to someone that's trying to convert that plastic into something else, just put yourself in that shoe. Like, you're gonna say, this is dirty. I don't want this. I'm not gonna pay you money, or you better give me a 50% discount or something. I don't know. So does that answer the question?
Yeah. Yeah, especially you were talking about being in rural areas versus urban areas and so forth, changes what recyclers can collect, right? Are there any plastics that are safe to microwave?
They all have chemicals in them, but supposedly I don't know. You guys, it comes from oil and gas. It's an oil and gas byproduct, which is a waste product, turned magically into this clear, magical illusion product. It's chemicals. It's chemicals that makes this. So I would, if it were me, I would rather go on the safe side and microwave my stuff in like ceramic or glass, in something reusable. There are some plastics that say, like the big like water gallon, like where's that for the water cooler called? A lot of them are saying BPA free, but BPA is just one of many chemicals that can leach from plastic into your water source. So I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. Okay. There was quite a bit of conversation going on regarding restaurants, and especially in COVID, the takeout, people trying to support restaurants by buying food that they will then take out. And so one of the questions came up as to whether there are health codes that prevent restaurants from filling a takeout container that you bring in.
Sadly, there are, and that's one of the other things that we have to change somehow or get creative about. Back before COVID times, if someone wanted to bring their reusable container, we would say, you sadly have to sit at the restaurant, enjoy a nice glass of wine. When your food comes, you can then scoop it out into your reusable container and take it home. That's sadly the easiest way to bring your own reusable. But there are different programs. For example, in Portland, Oregon, they have these kind of like vending machines that are vending out reusable containers. And they're starting to incorporate this system throughout the city so that you can drop off your reusable container, say at a McDonald's drop-off box. They can all have red boxes, then why not these kiosks or areas where you can deliver your reusable container? So there are different ways that we're starting to get creative, but we still have a way to go.
So then there was a conversation going on in the chat about everything. If you just look around your house from where you're sitting, you see plastic in everything. So the question is there another product that is as versatile as plastic that can be used to replace plastic, the plastic that's in everything?
Yeah, sadly, no. That's what made it such a good product, is that it's so flexible and malleable, and there's so many different types of chemical compositions that can make a plastic either super soft and easy to tear or super hard and impossible to break through. It's all over the place. I would say compostable plastics that are coming up are looking to be a solution. The only caveat with that is that you have to have a compost facility to take that compostable cutlery, or it's still single use. We want to get away from single use as much as possible. But if you are using compostable bags to put in your compost and freeze it, which is something that I do, because I am a part of the industrial composting operation that we have here in Colorado, then yeah, that's great. The thing is, people always ask me as well, if I buy compostable bags and don't have compost service and send it to the landfill instead, it's better because, well, they're saying it's better, right? Because it'll all turn into soil and help bury everything. But the thing is, no. When organic waste is at the landfill, it creates methane gas instead, because there is no oxygen or water to aid those microbes in creating healthy soils. And a compostable bag is an organic product because it's made from plant-based products. So it's just going to emit methane versus help bury everything. So do keep that in mind with compostable plastics. You do need service for an industrial compost facility.
Okay, thank you, Jasmine. We are right up at 8 o'clock, so I think we should probably end our Q&A and go into our breakout rooms.
One of the goals for this is to create community and to leave with a personal action pledge from what you've learned. So there's so many different ways in which you can take action, and it's our hope that the small groups of you can say your name and what you are hoping your personal action pledge is, or what you're inspired or called to do.
We'll get you back into the main room for a wrap up at 8:15.
Hey, Brian.
Hey, Paul, how you doing?
Doing good.
Haven't
I
seen.
like your post that you're doing in the chat, so thank you.
Oh no, thank you. It's I'm actually broadcasting this on my YouTube channel as well because I knew it was going to be so educational.
Good. Hi, Sarah.
Hello.
Hi there. Let's see if any other people join in before we jump in. But yeah, I've jotted down things from the movie, and I've jotted down things from tonight, but also been thinking about things that we've been doing already to reduce plastic that I like, that I've already seen. So I got several things to bounce out for you guys to see if you're joining and what we'll do, or what you guys are up to. But like, good stuff. Hi, Mary.
Sorry I'm late. I had a call that I had to take.
No worries. So maybe this is it. I know we were in the 15th breakout room. I don't know how many there were, but maybe we're trying to have us only be like in 4 or 5 in a room. So most of my meetings go these days. But well, nice to meet you all. Is anyone here connected to Bruce University's coach or the Cook Body Brain? No? Okay.
I got word about this from the First Universalist Church, but I'm not a member there.
Okay, so
I also not a member, but active with some of the members in the community, for sure.
very cool. I was just asking because my former company that I owned, Lightly Trading, we worked on helping optimize the energy efficiency of their new building, well, the old building too, but the new building, but to see if anyone was enjoying the building. No one can, very few people go into the building, now, but hopefully people are still enjoying it. It's just fun. But anyway, well, I'll throw out some things if I may, and I'd love to hear from other folks, but one of the key things I feel like we are going to do, my wife and I, in our household, is we're going to write our state legislator on getting rid of the ban on banning plastics. That's something that I researched just a little bit more, but it's absurd that we somehow stopped that because we thought we would be hurting the recycling industry by banning certain plastics. That sounds like the plastics industry coming in and writing legislation that looked like it was going to be so cool for everybody. So don't ban those plastics so we can keep the recycling industry going. Like, oh my gosh. So, and I realized I'm going to go back to stuff I used to do 20 years ago and listen really carefully about what we're getting to avoid buying things in plastics that are number 3, number 6, and the number 7 non-PLA. Those are some of the first things that are coming to mind, but I got some other things I can share. But anyone else have some immediate takeaways that they were thinking about doing?
Well, I gotta be honest. Sorry, I'm trying to plug my computer in before she dies on me.
Okay.
I gotta be honest. A lot of that is definitely those are fantastic steps in the process, right? Reducing the amount of plastics, trying to buy ones that are most recyclable, right? Avoiding the trash plastics, the plastic bags, making sure that we're mitigating our own consumption. What I've found though for myself is that our infrastructure isn't built to help people consume differently on a consistent basis. And I'll give you an example. I'm actually one of the people responsible for getting the Civic Center Conservancy to convert their food trucks, mandating that compostable silverware, compostable bowls, and then introducing the 3-stream instead of just a straight consumption to landfill process was put into place. Now, I'm sure you've all probably been to Old Town Fort Collins once or twice in your life and could definitely recognize the catastrophic differences between the shopping districts of Fort Collins and the shopping districts of Denver, where there is virtually zero access to recycling bins anywhere in the city that are not in a park for mass dumping of excess plastic or recyclable materials.
Right. Well said, Brian. Yeah, I do some fair amount of work with Colorado State University. Again, Fort Collins is far more evolved, is what I've seen, with that. So it's like, and that's kudos to them, but yes, something that we need to be replicating. Sarah and Mary, do you live in Denver or Aurora or Lakewood, or where are you guys? Just Brian, I'm going to assume you're in Denver, right?
Yeah, not too far from East High School.
Okay, so
I'm in Denver.
Go ahead, Sarah. I'm sorry.
I'm in Denver.
Okay. And Mary?
Yes, I'm in Denver too, and you mentioned the legislation for getting rid of that ban on the ban.
Right.
And I was happy to to hear Jasmine say that that's going to be introduced. That bill is going to be introduced in February. So I'm really getting more interested in the legislative part of it, because this has to be done by laws, I think, because people are, the industry is not going to be altruistic to try to find different ways of producing their containers for what they sell. So I'm doing that. I'm going to get more interested in that and just try to buy things in glass. If there's an option to buy something in glass, like if you think about salad dressings, if you buy salad dressings, you really have to search for a container that's made out of glass, but it's so much more recyclable. And I know there are a couple of stores here in the Denver area that you can bring your glass jars to refill certain things. I mean, it's pretty specialized, I think, and it's not something that, go to, but it's a start. But there's my 2 cents.
I feel like I am going back to kindergarten, just listening to the recyclable symbol and the numbers inside and the letters underneath the symbol. That's kind of a refresher that I have not had. So that's certainly eye-opening and helpful.
Mary, on that, on the specialization or actually being able to take your own containers, the Sprouts grocery stores where you can fill items from the barrel, if you pre-weigh your plastic, solid plastics or glass, when you bring them in, they factor that as an option.
Oh, really? I didn't. I mean, I go to Sprouts sometimes, but I haven't noticed that. I'll have to ask about it. Are they now with COVID? Are they having the bins still?
That's a good point, Mary. That's what I've been seeing. Brian, you can interject, but what I've been seeing at Sprouts is, unfortunately, they got bought into being overly conservative, in my opinion, about protecting the transfer of concerns around COVID, which there's a lot of justification, but I was like, good God. I mean, they went back to putting everything into plastic bags at the Sprouts by our house, and I was just like, come on, guys, this is taking it to an extreme, especially since it's now, at least the research I've been seeing most recently, it's like, 99.99999% airborne, not surface-borne, as far as transfer goes. And it's like, and yet they still are doing things with plastic bagging and that. So that's one that any of us that shop at those places should write a comment, send an email in, or write a comment in and say, guys, please go back to those. This is not necessary anymore. We're wasting we're using a bunch of plastic we don't need to use. So that'd be my statement to that. But Brian, is your Sprouts doing it differently? Because the one by us went back to plastic bags.
I don't know. Honestly, since the pandemic hit, I have been volunteering at a food bank, making sure that thousands of people get food every month. And we do a lot of end-of-life food. So I haven't bought groceries other than some staple things like coffee creamer and canned beer.
Okay. Good staple.
Recyclable.
Oh, yes, of course.
Mary, if I can go back to you, what you just said, reiterating about the legislation coming out in February, I realize it's just 4 of us, but I hope when we go back to the breakout here in a few minutes, if all of us, all 90 plus of us, but all 150 that signed on for this, if we all looked at that and said we would sign on to, a petition, let's say EcoCycle, just makes this super easy for us, and say we sign on as supporters of that and help us get it to our specific state legislator and senator, that would have a big impact, honestly, because, I don't know, long ago I used to lobby at the state legislature, and things that would have 100 or more people definitely got attention, really fast, because they knew it was something that was on people's radar. They knew that it was something like that. If each one of us, said, one other person or maybe two other people to join us in signing on that, we got it to 300 some people, that would be a beautiful step, in the right direction. I think legislators would be finding it very, very interesting that they got a big influx of people signing on and saying, oh, get rid of the ban on banning plastics, let communities do this across the state, let's go back to this. So, yeah.
Well, and I might add that I just got an email today from my state senator and state representative. They're having a town hall meeting. So if you get on your representative's email list, you can attend the town meetings, and it's so easy because it's on Zoom, and you can, put your 2 cents in there too.
That's a great idea, Mary. Thank you. I've done it for because I'm in Jason Crow's congressional district.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
I've done it for that, but you're right, for the state legislature, that makes a great deal of sense. So,
hey, before we go, I just want to suggest that one of the things we need to watch in that legislation is that it doesn't get too watered down, where the manufacturing companies get permission to further pollute. Something that came up in the microbead legislation was permission to pollute the water.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Good hanging out with you all.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Up until COVID, I took all the compostable cups from the church in Fort Collins down to you all, down to EcoCycle, because you can compost them. I would make trips down to Boulder to buy the cups, and then bring them up to Trinity Lutheran. We would use them for 2 or 3 months for our coffee social, and then I'd take them all home and take them back down to you. So guess-wise, I was going crazy, but it was my attempt.
I also went to EcoCycle a lot.
Yeah.
My recycling company would stop taking something. I would go up to Boulder and get rid of it there because it's the only place to take it.
Fascinating place, I think.
Okay, everyone. Most of us, I think, are back in the main room now. So we wanted to offer this time as a chance to share some of your personal action plans. If you would like to let others of us know what you have decided to do to take action on this serious problem of the plastics pollution and the whole industry. And if you also have any other comments that you would like to share with others, this would be the time to do that. We have about 8 minutes. So just unmute yourself and be courteous that other people may also be trying to talk. So hopefully it won't be too difficult to understand each other. So anybody who would like to share?
So Anne and Hillary, this is Paul Creasure. I'll jump in and I'll just say thank you for everything that you guys have done, and I was happy to be part of the subcommittee. But you guys have done a great job with this. I've written down many things from the movie, many things from this, but one of the most critical things I'm going to do is get active around helping the legislation on stopping the ban on plastics. So Jasmine, I don't know if it's something you can make even easier for all of us, but the group that I was in, we were talking about, like, if we signed on, and then if we got 1 or 2 other people outside of this group to sign on, like, I know my wife will, I'm sure I can get, some other family member that's a voting age to do it as well. It's like, if we did that, we got to 300 or 400, that'd make a very big splash with the state legislature, and a very important thing, an easy thing for us to do. But there's other things I'm going to do, but that's the first one. I'm sure we can go back to being very conscientious about buying from glass and avoiding 3, 6, and 7 plastics like I used to. I want us to be more aware of that. But that local state legislation is a really easy opportunity. So,
may I ask who's going to sponsor that legislation? Do you know?
Yeah, so that was on the slide. And these slides will be made available to you all, so you can click on the links there. It's Representative Lisa Cutter, Representative Alex Valdez, and Senator Julie Gonzalez.
So I'm going to focus on producer responsibility. I think that's where we've got to really look. And I signed up for that February 24th session for that SB, 20-055. I don't know anything about it right now, but I'm really interested in learning more about it. And I've been baking bread for the last year and a half, so I haven't purchased a loaf of bread in a year and a half. No plastic for my bread.
Great. Great.
Yeah. Can I have something? What nothing was mentioned about now. A couple people did something in the chat, and where is that as the status of that in the future of the plastics rather than oil? I know it can't be used in every application. It's more expensive to make a bag with hemp.
You're asking about the hemp.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Did you get that, Jasmine?
Yeah, so there's a hemp council, but it's mainly being used for building materials right now. Like hemp is very magical and it can be made into many different things. I am not sure about a hemp substitute for like plastic production. And again, I do want to clarify, the bad plastics right now are the single-use plastics. Those are the things that are like littering. The movie touched base on all of these single-use sachets, and it's mainly like what we find littered around everywhere. Not all plastics are bad. Like plastics is, I don't want to say a miracle material, but it is very flexible and malleable, and we need it for our cars, like dashboards or medical equipment or whatever. That's fine and dandy. I think the industry does have a way to go when it comes to reducing its emissions and like whatever it's emitting into the atmosphere. But that goes for a lot of other manufacturers as well. But really, just single-use plastics. It's not necessary. In some cases, they are. I did meet someone who was a organ transplant survivor, and she had mentioned she can only use disposable ware just because she doesn't want to risk getting an infection or something like that in her body. And yes, there are exceptions to this, and I do want to be cognizant of that, but the majority of people don't need 5 ketchup sachets when they order, I don't know, a burger or something like that.
Hey, Jasmine, can I ask you about aseptic packaging, like a milk container or something that some soup or something comes in?
Yeah.
Are those really getting recycled?
Yes, they are. So there's something called the Carton Council that decided to make their cartons recyclable. And the way that they did it, because these aseptic cartons do have a layer of aluminum lining with carton and then plastic, the way that these products are recyclable is that there is no adhesive used. Adhesive is actually makes it way harder to recycle something. For example, cars, they can also be recycled, but the parts need to be taken apart. So what the Carton Council did was seal their products together. They stamped their products together. So they actually buy it back. So it's the best case of producer responsibility that we have. And they unstamp it and separate the items with like items and recycle it themselves.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is Jeff, and I just saw a message from Barb about where you can buy mesh bags that you could bring into the grocery store and put your produce in instead of having to use their disposable plastic bag dispenser things. And so that's part of my pledge, is to find inventive ways of reducing my use of single-use or disposable plastic packaging in any way possible, and to just sort of double down on my efforts to recycle wherever I can find stuff that can be recycled.
You could find those bags at Vitamin Cottage.
Yeah, Target apparently.
They're made of a natural fabric, and they have a string. You can put your produce in those.
They're wonderful. You can take them home from the store. You can wash the product in the bag. You can store it in your refrigerator in the bag. They're great. Get yourself.
And you can wash them in your washing machine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can use them over and over and over again.
Yes. Yeah.
So no single use.
Reusing that. Yeah. And do you want me to get to the PowerPoint? We still have a couple slides and.
Yes, we probably need to close our event this evening, and I just want to say to everyone how much we appreciate your responses this evening, your thoughtful chats and other comments. We appreciate your commitment to take action and your enthusiastic participation in our event tonight. So the plastic problem is indeed a critical challenge of our time, but with the committed efforts of people like you, there is hope for restoration of our planet. So we encourage you to follow through on your actions that you've committed to in your personal action plan. And we want you to remember to refer to the resource list that you received in emails prior to tonight's event. We will include a link to that resource list again in the follow-up email, as well as a link to Jasmine's presentation. And since we were recording this event tonight, you will also receive a link to the recording. I encourage you to keep connected to other eco leaders by getting involved in the actions and campaigns of the sponsoring organizations. You'll find a wealth of information about their efforts on their websites, which will also be included in the follow-up email. And then finally, the film producers have asked event participants to provide feedback by completing a brief post-screening survey. The link to this survey will be in the follow-up email. Please feel free to contact Jasmine or me if you have any questions or need additional information.
I have a real quick question.
Okay.
Are we going to have another one of these meetings sometime in the future? Any plans for a follow-up meeting or?
That's a good question. I think we have no plans for doing that at this point in time, but our planning team will get together and we will decide at this point if there is, and it seems like there's enough interest that we could have a follow-up meeting, but we'll keep you posted on that.
All right, well, I would be interested.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Now, Jasmine, the slide as I would like to close our gathering with the wisdom of Grandfather Rolling Thunder, a Cherokee medicine elder. This is the earth, healed again, growing green and blue. I want you to remember this exactly as it is, and then go and tell the people that if enough of us hold this image in our minds, we can heal the earth and make it like it was a long time ago. So thank you, everyone, and good night.
Thank you. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did Jasmine have some more slides?
Thank you. This was wonderful.
Nope, this is the end.
Thank you.
Bravo, everybody. Jasmine, beautiful job. Thank you so much. We're thrilled to be connected with you, and well done, beautifully paced. Bravo, and Tony, thank you for, I believe we have her because of you. So much appreciated.
Yes. And you did a great job at facilitating.
Yes,
that was
bravo.
very nice. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. And Hillary's, all of Hillary's work behind the scenes and getting everything out there. She certainly, yes, she did a lot.
So there you have it, folks. Zoom meeting on plastic pollution. Robert, hit me up directly. For the rest of you, thanks for being here. We'll talk to you later. Have a great day.